afternoon. It's been 40 years now in the advertising and branding industry for me, and looking back, each one of those years has been a learning opportunity. After graduating from IIM Ahmedabad, I spent the first 2 decades and a bit in the big agencies, the JWT, Lintas, Ogilvy, and BBDO. And I had the privilege of working on brands, the large brands such as Wills, Nokia, Dabur, Emami, ICI Paints, Oral-B, and Adidas. I went to head a branding company where over 13 years, I got to co-create and practice a philosophy called brand futurity. And this methodology helped me write the birth certificates of many a startup, as well as helped me in rebranding corporations and government institutions and reinventing them as brands. After getting back to India 7 years ago from the Middle East to start up my own brand consultancy firm, BrandNEW, I'm been fortunate with a variety of clientele. Many of these assignments entailed creating, if not redefining, organizational and product brand philosophies afresh. And so this session is intended to share with you a methodology that I have followed and which has worked at various stages of a brand's life cycle. There are many presentations, countless presentations about what is a brand and why one should undertake branding. There are, however, less number of presentations on the how to do it. And therefore, I have taken on the responsibility of sharing with you over the next 40 minutes or so how we do it and how you could too. The methodology I'm going to reveal is quite simple and easy to follow. It also isn't too elaborate or expensive. Even for startups, it has been applied frugally, consistently, and successfully. Every time one has applied it, one has assessed the situational parameters from scratch. And so, in a sense, one has treated it as a brand new endeavor, from a business to be newly set up to an old entity that has wished to compete afresh as a relevant and contemporary proposition. Before one sets out to get into the methodology, just for us to be on the same page, I'd like to describe brand philosophy in my terms as a set of values, code of ethics, and principles that determine the nature, direction, priorities, and practices of the business. It defines and sets apart the culture of the organization and brand. It determines the organization's way of dealing with customers, stakeholders, and external parties. One of the most abiding examples of brand philosophy in action is Brand Singapore. Singaporeans, as we all know, are competent, committed, and they do deliver. And when you land in Singapore airport, for example, the meticulous design of a Changi airport, the sheer efficiency of the processes, the discipline, they all stand out for you. And then there are the other city brands that have their own aura and history and philosophy and emotional connect. New York City, Bangkok, they immediately connote different things that are abiding images and experiences. But these philosophies, you may say, have been arrived at after decades of living through what works. So what happens when you start up something and have a clean slate? How do you decide what you want to be? Let's remind ourselves why you need a philosophy at all. The short answer to that question is control. A brand philosophy provides a set of controls by which to steer the brand along a purposeful path. Enunciating and establishing a brand philosophy among those who drive the brand ensures all all agreed goals are addressed. And when a brand philosophy powers marketing action, differentiation is better achieved. A brand philosophy guided strategy helps in amplifying brand messaging and its registration. And when the whole organization is aligned, enthused, and committed to the brand and what it seeks to drive, better results obviously ensue. When the Shah Rukh Khan owned Kolkata Knight Riders brand was conceived, it was determined that it would look and feel and behave like a quintessential passionate Bengali fan in a much more, who typically is a much more involved, analytical, and culturally expressed. And that's precisely how this brand stands out in the IPL market. We must live our brand values on a daily basis for it to make a real difference in the marketplace. A brand that goes places is led by a vision that is constantly pulling it forward to something very clear, something not cloudy. It's a vision consumers understand and follow, and all the drivers of the brand certainly subscribe to and action. An effective brand has focus and synergy, and it is important that the brand appears to do all the things that play from and to the same vision, and that it subscribes to the same brand promise. Another great example of this is brand Dubai. Dubai's vision by a ruler set the brand on an audacious path. He turned a barren desert land into a symbol of luxury, richness, abundance. He promoted the desired personality of an enviable promised land, a place of opportunity where dreams can come true, and which would become a new destination for people to converge upon continually for some of the biggest events and festivals and seminars, as well as for business, a confluence of some eclectic cultures. As we get into a more detailed discussion on brand philosophy, a little reminder: theory and practice must interact and each other, because vision without action is a daydream, and action without vision is a nightmare. And you've got to think about the big things that while you're doing small things, so that all the small things go in the right direction. I'm aware many of you listening in today are entrepreneurs who have recently commenced their entrepreneurial journeys. And I quite vibe with your challenges at the onset. Begin learning swimming, you jump into the pool and begin to thrash around and stay afloat and hopefully reach some measure of safety without drowning at first. At first, you focus on making some business happen, concentrate on getting revenue and establishing, at least directionally, that your concept works. At this time, you are not really being choosy about consumers, wherever they may come from and buy from you. You're okay with that. At least the wheels are turning. As a startup, you are guided more by intuition rather than a detailed marketing plan and strategy. And brand philosophy is probably not what you're hankering for just yet, because you've got better things to spend money and time on, and you just want to get on with the business. And so, in keeping with your best judgment, you carry on various initiatives that promise you awareness generation. However, at some time, you feel you need to get more organized and focused about your brand and wonder how you will go about it. There is no perfect prescribed time to construct your brand philosophy. Ideally, it should be at the start, because come on, if you didn't know where you were going, any road will lead you there. But not everyone is as lucky as Christopher Columbus. And so at some point in time, you've got to get into it. And I see many entrepreneurs come out to get professional help when it has started to pinch and you're not getting enough awareness or conversions. And so you refill your gas tank a bit, Switch on that ignition with some measure of renewed purpose. The key is in your hands, and now you're ready to make a brand new start. But before I go into how to construct brand philosophy, I'm first going to give you a couple of examples on what the end result of a well-constructed brand philosophy ought to look like. Indigo has been around almost 14 years now and has been the most ubiquitous and profitable airlines in that span of time. From a brand development perspective, it got its act just right from the start. It stood for one thing: efficiency, marvelous efficiency. It's at once a story of brand austerity and fight. A simple strategic formula of low fares, on-time flights, and hassle-free experience that has become its recipe for success. Its marketing spends have been judicious, and yet Indigo created a confident, cheerful, omnipresent brand that has a very positive presence. Or at least it certainly had till a few years ago. No wonder their prefix is sexy, and that's what they intended to be. So, in terms of, let's look back at one of their early commercials.
When our chefs wake up on time, our kitchen works on time. When our kitchen works on time, the food leaves for the plane on time. When the hostesses wake up on time, they do their makeup on time. They look oh so pretty on time. When our ground force does their work on time, our pilots take off on time. People get to meetings on time. We get our work done on time. And when we get our work done on time, we become the world's most powerful economy on time. On time is a wonderful thing. When our chef...
I hear some of you muttering under your breath, hey, I'm not Amitabh Ghosh and I don't have such resources, nor as large a business appetite as an Indigo. So my second example is a young NGO that came to us recently with a desire to scale. They were doing great work in the mental health space, training and onboarding counselors to help children touched by trauma. Here's a snapshot of their web page. And this entity, I Am, were finding it difficult to package their story and especially present to prospective donors to generate funds for pro bono programs and large government projects. They also needed to maximize awareness such that they could connect with a large number of trauma counselors and also get direct work with beneficiaries. So we undertook a 2-month collaborative exercise, and it helped them present their story more lucidly and efficiently. The brand is captured in this poster. The exercise, the poster on the exercise progressed to a brand name refinement, adding prefix that made them I am well-being instead of a rather am. Also modified the identity, and already they are getting a good amount of traction. They're involved with Delhi government work now related to COVID, and they have forged collaborations with several schools and counseling experts in India and abroad, as you see in the poster on the right. Now, a brand philosophy would have the following constituents in order to define the brand in a 360-degree manner. However, the constituents listed here are not necessarily arrived at in the same sequence. Nevertheless, I do want to share what each one of these components reveal about a brand. I have found across more than 100 projects in my career that the bedrock of brand philosophy rests on values. And the filtration of a set of values into one essence, which is the brand truth, is at the core of the brand. If Indigo stands for efficiency, I am well-being stands for compassion. Paperboat stands for nostalgia. And Liril stands for freshness. Brand position, on the other hand, is about relevance and difference. It shows how Paperboat is relevant to the consumer by sufficing their category needs, such as a wholesome fruit-based drink to quench thirst, and the difference it holds vis-a-vis its competitors, which unveil some happy associations from the past through the product experience. The tagline or proposition sums this all up. Vision is meant to be a continuing dream, like motivating force that makes you jump up from and to work. Mission is a set of strategies that help you address the vision. And purpose is why you are in business and your connect to a lasting community benefit. Finally, brand culture. It's a set of policies and processes that form the unique manner in which vision and mission are pursued, and a set of symbols, rituals, and role models that are associated with the brand. Clients often balk at approaching a marketing branding agency because they fear it would entail a great deal of research, enormous amounts of management time, and lots of money. Well, I'll share with you a methodology that calls for neither of the three in any copious amounts. Instead of indulging in primary research, we shortcut the process through secondary research. We bring in the data required through a handful of people who know the market and your brand. Choose a judicious handful of brand champions from within your own system. It should include partners, directors, key investors, important representatives of the front face of your business, from marketing, sales, brand communication, maybe even your marketing or PR agency, if you have one appointed. And it may have a couple of representatives from important, perhaps customer or influence groups who have dealt with you closely and have a point of view on your brand. Please don't go for numbers or political protocol. This team should be carefully handpicked on the basis of those who really know your brand well or know your customers well and who are able to hold a point of view that you are keen to hear. This team will be the source of all the data that we can work on with our brand philosophy. And it should thereby be people whose opinion you trust, as I said before. Brand champions are those that will not only be involved in the first stage of construction, but will also be the internal flag bearers and change agents for organizational transformation that subsequently ought to take place. What aspects do you need to analyze? You should gather individual answers from each of these brand champions to a questionnaire that you would curate and which should be individually shared confidentially to each of those selected brand champions. They will respond back to one person who will compile the whole study. The questions ought to include the purpose of business, so the startup, the vision, etc., as is understood by that individual. What needs are being served by your proposition, by your product, by your organization, a kind of a SWOT analysis, which includes all the various factors of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The key target audiences, actually all the target audiences, and their nomination of the principal customer. And that itself also is a useful thing to analyze across different components of your brand champion team. And primary competition or category that your offering subscribes to. And the unique differentiator that you have, values to, and of course, the expectations from a branding exercise. I will now take you into some of the details of how this kind of an exercise was carried out in a recent case study of another small enterprise called Titli, which is an early childhood training organization. It's a social enterprise that addresses the rather ignored early childhood care and education segment. That is, children under the age of 6. The client has an ongoing certificate program in early childhood development since 2015, being held across 3 metro centers, as well as recently added online programs. And secondly, there is a training and monitoring program that they carry out with Anganwadi workers and helpers across certain states in collaboration with the district administration there. The background of this project was similar to IAM's case. Lack of attention to professional branding earlier was now showing up in slackening of awareness, traction, and leads to grow businesses. Now, remember the questionnaire I talked about? Well, here is the actual questionnaire that was handed out to, I think it was 5 people to interact with. While one is not going to go through all of these, and more or less it kind of reflects the main aspects of investigation, I'd like to just point out 3 of them. One was the question number 3. Name any one brand in any field or category that inspires you and which you would wish Titli could emulate in some way. Often, people bring into the frame some very useful, out of the normal field sort of examples or inspirations that sometimes are very useful to bring into this particular segment, into this exercise. The other was who would be the principal customer of Titli, which one is expected to describe in some detail, and what about Titli's offering would interest him or her the most. And the third one, which I want you to look at, is question number 9. If Titli is a company, as a company were an animal, which animal would it be? It's astounding. The richest data about values that you stand for really comes from their explanation of why they chose that animal. So what do we do with these answers? First, the mechanical part of it. We do question-wise tabulation to look for commonalities and standout perspectives. In other words, you do it, you see each question by question and record all the various answers under that. And then you highlight the commonalities, and you also, in a separate highlight in highlighted color, highlight the standout statements, which are new, which are perhaps something that wasn't looked at before. These, along with the branding agency or the coordinator's comments, are then presented back to the main client partners and whoever constitutes a second group, which is a brand think tank. And these constituents of the brand think tank participate in a dialogue for convergence. They're the ones who, having reviewed all the various answers consolidated for the first time, then do a sorting exercise, an agreement exercise, a debating exercise, and then based on everyone's inputs, arrive at certain commonalities and decisions. One of the most important commonalities and convergent aspects is one of value building. We need to, through the consortium of all the answers, come finally to maybe not more than 5 values that the company stands for. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5. That's okay, you can choose. But we say 5 is a good number because it's easy to work with, it gives you the diversity, and it gives you also the focus. Because God made 5 fingers in our hand, and we can do everything required through those 5 fingers. So 5 is a good number. I'm going to show a glimpse of what kind of value sorting was done in this exercise in the subsequent slides. Please follow the process rather than the details, because I'm taking the liberty of showing you all the details, but I'm not going to take you through them. That will take an awful amount of time. In this Titli's case, there were 6 baskets in which the values were sorted out, were placed. And in each of these baskets, the team, the think tank, chose the one value that they felt could really drive them forward, that Titli would really represent. We did this as a later exercise. Actually, the 6 baskets also had an interesting acronym, which spelled cheers. But that was something by the side of it, and we used it to the hilt. Titli's core values from that exercise came out to be intelligent, skilled, reliable, humble, and passionate. Then, through the help of a filtration exercise, which is a bit proprietarial and a bit involved, so I won't take you through it, but there was a filtering exercise whereby those 5 values were derived from those 5 values, we arrived at one synthesized, one single concept, the filtrate really of that filtration process. And that was empowering. Empowering as the final essence of the brand really sat very well with this team. And we decided to take that forward into the positioning. So how did the positioning lead for Titli? And here I'll read it out, because in this classical positioning statement, it explains exactly what this does. It's an internal document, though. This is not meant for putting out on your website. But Titli is the empowering early childhood training organization operating across urban and rural India for teachers, educators, parents, and caregivers who deal with children under 6, and government and private organizations who run or support programs for children in that field, that knows what inspires children and empowers educators in a holistic, integrated, and transnational manner, better than various local NGOs working in the ECCE field, because it creates original content for teacher training, has a great network of early childhood educators, is focused only on capacity building in ECCE, has good experience in rural urban markets, and along with thought leadership and understanding of public policy and government constraints, can operate well. So the positioning statement goes into is, for, that, better than, and because. And that explains to any new entrant, even to a business, what exactly the brand does. This takes us to something which is a little more promotion worthy. It's an essence essay. It's a brand construct or a essay, as it were, which kind of more eloquently and less technically than the brand positioning statement explains what Titli does. And you read the brand positioning statement, and you can look at the bold statements here. You know basically what it more or less can express. The next is a more concise version of that essence essay, which is like a brand boilerplate, something that can go onto a press release, at the end of that press release, which tells the journalist what your brand stands for. And if it's sufficiently compressed, can also go under your own email signature. Very quickly, here are the vision, mission, and purpose statements for Titli. Now, for vision, and you know exactly how a vision sort of operates, here we looked at 2 statements for vision. And because both really were powerful in this case. One talked about the organization itself, and the other talked about the impact that it had on the beneficiary segment itself. The mission was the strategy, a three-pronged strategy to be able to address that vision. I won't go through this in detail, but you understand the direction that it goes. And the purpose is to make a positive contribution to the lives of young ones and thereby benefit society as a whole in the long term. Which led us to the brand proposition. The motto was already there, together in transforming learning in India, and the tagline, which came out from the metaphor of the butterfly, was spread your wings and fly. So that, in a nutshell, was the manner in which the whole methodology was taken through. And what came out was really a whole set of tools which were extremely important and usable in various dimensions of communication. So what does a good brand philosophy do? It provides a story behind the name and identity. It builds synergy in messaging, content, and tonality. It helps consumers to recognize the brand easily. And it establishes standards and continuity for all stakeholders to follow. And the best way to do this and document this and follow this thereafter is to create something called a brand guidebook and a brand identity manual. And finally, a good brand philosophy really is able to attract the right talent and generate inquiries from associates and media. The brand philosophy then goes into a multi-channel marketing process. From the brand philosophy comes the creative master concept, which can be detonated in various ways depending on what your plans and appetite and so on and so forth are. Certainly, it must be represented well in your website, brochure, emails, social media, paid search, keywords, your signage, interiors, mass and offline media, below the line events, conferences, and stationery and other merchandising. Just as a refresher, I'm going to play a short video which more or less summarizes these concepts that I've just presented to you.
What is a brand? A brand is the difference between a pair of running shoes and a pair of Nikes. A brand is what people feel about you, your product, the service you provide, or your organization. It's part rational, but mostly emotional. People will forgive a strong brand if it makes a mistake. Remember New Coke? Likewise, people won't forgive a weak brand if it makes a mistake. Remember Gateway Computers? We thought so. So, what is the secret of a strong brand? The answer is surprisingly simple. Focus. I'll say it again. Focus. Great brands stand for something. Not a lot of things. One thing. For decades, Swedish car maker Volvo defined their brand with a single word: safety. Well, it seemed to work for them. Sometimes you have to think beyond the category to know what you stand for. Harley-Davidson makes motorcycles. Want to guess what they stand for? Freedom. Not a more powerful engine, not a more reliable bike or a smoother ride. Freedom. Brands are experiential. Take Starbucks. They differentiate themselves in many ways and offer a consistent brand experience in every Starbucks you visit. They even have their own language. Starbucks has created a unique community of coffee lovers that speak Starbucksese and are true brand ambassadors. It doesn't get any better than that. Starbucks had realized they weren't in the business of serving coffee. They were in the business of serving people. So, can you put a monetary value on a brand? The people at Interbrand Research can. Remember the fine folks at Coca-Cola we mentioned earlier? Care to guess what their brand is worth? That's right. According to Interbrand, about 61% of the value of the Coca-Cola Corporation is brand. That's a lot of cash. Here's the monetary value of some other brands you'll be familiar with. So a brand is worth protecting and nurturing. But how? Here are a few key points to help maintain or even grow your brand. 1. Be different. The world is filled with parody products and services. Make yours stand out. 2. Be vigilant. Don't allow your brand to do things it shouldn't. Don't be the gateway computers of your category. 3. Be relevant. The marketplace changes constantly. Make sure your brand keeps. So, who really owns a brand? The brand manager? The VP marketing? Brands are owned by the people. It used to be a company would tell people about their brand. It was pretty much a one-way thing. Now, it is much more of a conversation. But don't worry, this instant feedback can be very useful. It gives you a glimpse into what's in the hearts and minds of your customers and allows you to take action when you need to. It can also help you stay focused, and that's a good thing. So let's recap. A brand is much more than your logo or the color of your truck fleet. It's something intangible. It's what people think of you, but mostly on an emotional level. Great brands are focused. They stand for something. Great brands are not just seen and heard, they're experienced, and in a way that is uniquely theirs. A brand can have tremendous value, and should be treated that way. Keep your brand healthy by being different, vigilant, and relevant. And finally, never forget that people, your customers, own your brand. Listen to them, respect them, most of all, earn their trust.
I'd like to come to the end of this session with sharing one final, very brief case study. Himat is a line of contemporary and high-quality clothing made at India's first all-women factory in New Delhi. It was an interesting case study where one had to weave a story around several contiguous and potentially brandable entities. A pattern maker's job at the top of the value chain in the Indian fashion industry is usually held by men called masterjis. Fashion entrepreneur Gayatri Jolly, after graduating from Parsons in New York, returned to India to start a chain of training centers near slum areas in Delhi. She began to teach women from low-income communities to empower themselves financially by breaking existing social patterns of male dominance and learning the skills of pattern making. She called these centers Master G, with a G. With the cream of the crop from these training centers finding placement in Gayatri's studio, where she undertook contract manufacturing in an ethical and empathetic environment, she created a symbiotic ecosystem between Master G training centers, Master G studio, and her in-house flagship brand, Himat. Himat is German for the word home or belonging. Himat's positioning statement helped to clearly enunciate the interrelationship of social and business purpose, her product promise, and the powerful behind-the-scenes story that could potentially touch the discerning target consumer and influencer. Himat is the working women's comfort wear from India that makes a statement against the status quo and upholds authenticity for women who like to wear elegant contemporary clothes and are also discerning about who or what they associate with, better than any other designer wear, which usually showcases a designer's vanity, because the clothes are easy to maintain, versatile, and lasts a long time. They come from Master G Studio, run by a fashion entrepreneur of international stature, who believes in upholding gender equality, is committed to showcasing the fine quality produced by her women workers tutored in Master G training centers, which nurture talent and make a difference to their livelihood and their dignity. That was the whole 9 yards as far as the story is concerned. But the essence of Himat was even more interesting. And if anything, it was stirring. In fact, in the whole value filtration exercise, the one word that we came up with was stirring. So, Himat stirs us to passionately protect what intrinsically belongs to us. I won't read the whole thing, but the ones in bold, Himat provokes us and sensitizes us to what is worth defending, our home truth. And because Himat is a symbol of hope and dignity, it has this strength to stand for the right that we believe in. Look at this picture. What do you think you see below? Yes, it is an aerial view of Delhi's slums. It's a pattern from which emerged Himat's product design. Gayatri's early exposure as a teenager volunteer, as a social worker in the urban slum areas of Delhi, gave her the sensitivity and awareness about scarcity and inequality, and about a contrasting world. She was puzzled and fascinated to see how wealthy gated communities stood next to slum dwellings, creating an uneven texture of social fabric. It was no surprise then that Himat's first collection design was a silhouette which was inspired from such a maze. And by the way, the colors of the fabric that were chosen were most appropriately tirpal blue, curry orange, asbestos gray, burnt terracotta, moss green, and so on. The Himat brand was launched at a special event in New York City, and today it has achieved a premium and exclusive position through online channels, as well as shelf space at retail stores like Jensen's, Tycoon, Jaipur, at various embassy exhibitions around the country. It has been receiving rave reviews on TV channels and multiple women empowerment seminars as well. And so finally, a word about constructing brand philosophy. It is important to address it as early as you can and to get the right guidance in taking decisions which are really long-term. And when you've done it right, you get brand synergy, more consistency, stronger registration, better cost efficiency, more amplification, and ultimately greater influence. Thank you very much. Open to questions.
Indranil, plenty of questions that have come this way. I'm going to start reading them out to you. But firstly, thank you very much. I think what is important is you really have simplified this process massively. We've worked in large organizations, we've worked in small organizations. There are ways of doing this in very elaborate, drawn out processes, studies, lots of research, lots of data points. And then there is your way, which is basically condensing everything into quickly actionable, doable steps. And that really is the crux of your discussion. And that's really why we were very interested to have you speak to the audience. So thank you very much. Following from your discussion, there is a couple of questions here that I'm going to put to you. The first is from Sumit Roy, mobike@gmail.com. He says, should the brand decide its own culture or let it evolve from the brand's tribe members? For example, take religions. Religions are strong brands. Their culture and practices come from the believers and the rituals they adopted. But interestingly, they could also be because the rules that the religion and the head of the religion set up established a differentiation as well. So where is this culture coming from? Is it the established rules from the head of the brand, or is it consumers who have interpreted it, liked it, embraced it, and are then taking it on in its own direction?
Thank you very much for the question, Shumit. Trust you to come up with that. Yeah, Shumit and I have worked together over a number of years. The short answer to that is that it could come from either side. Culture is ultimately a confluence. And a leader or a brand maker who comes in to sort of establish a culture could well, put it up and create the edifice of what that culture should stand for. But ultimately, whether it works, whether it can really institutionalize itself in reality, depends on the feedback and the response that it gets. So, cultures are about a combination of practices that happen, but I think the brand maker has to first be able to cue the right culture through symbols and through advocated rituals, and by creating role models. And the most important role model is himself, because if he is at the top of the pyramid of his organization, not a role model, then what is the culture that can really be sustained? So yes, the answer is it is visualized by the leader, the creator of the brand, but ultimately, if it does not permeate and get to more followers who themselves then become role models, then that is not a self-sustainable model.
The other question is around, let's say an organization does not have a marketing head and wants to go with this exercise at least to test how this could, how this would impact them, how this could work for them. In the absence of somebody leading this, who is the next best person? Would it be the sales head? Would it be the HR head? Would it be the CEO himself who should lead these conversations around, the philosophy of the brand? The initial questionnaire that you shared.
Very relevant question, and I think the best way to go about is that the CEO or the head of the owner or whatever it is that pertains in that particular situation, it takes up the charge of the brand. He puts his stamp behind the brand and leads the charge from there. Now, he may, from organizational sort of process perspective, induct a salesperson or what in, but if it happened the other way around, it is a much more difficult and actually fraught with a lot of problems here, because sometimes the salesperson isn't able to get muster enough strength of confluence there. He's not able to get a lot of the people to agree with him, whereas a leader, the owner or the CEO, basically is able to get people's buy-in much more easily. That's one. And the second is that it is very tough for anybody else to come in and then try and just sit on the decision-making table without having any clue as to the background. And my methodology, which I talked about, if it does not include the CEO, it is fraught with a lot of problems. And therefore, it is very important that the brand champions or the brand, and certainly, if not the brand think tank, the brand champions has top management representation pretty much.
Perfect. One question that I think came from the Himat case study. Should brand philosophies necessarily be action-oriented? You talked about the word stirring. It's a very active word. Is there any advantage or is there any reference towards philosophies that drive action orientation in them? How does it come up?
Not hear you, Venkatesh, because you're cutting off somewhere. Sorry. Could you repeat that question, please?
I'm sorry. So this is around the brand philosophy itself. When you talked about the Himat example, you used the word stirring.
Yes.
Now that's a very powerful, active word. Should all brand philosophies try and discover that active word in their philosophy, or is it just whatever is the most natural fit that comes for a brand should be encouraged to be out there?
I didn't get the latter part of your question, but you're absolutely right. Stirring was a very powerful word that we arrived at, again, collaboratively, co-creatively. And a lot of the kind of manner in which we were able to stir the conscience of people when it came to offering the proposition and being able to reach out to influencers who could themselves advocate the stirring story of Himat to others was a very important part of the whole strategy that followed from the brand philosophy. I didn't quite get the last part of the question, but I presume that statement more or less takes care of it.
The question was, should brands necessarily find active,
Okay. Active, verbs rather than adjectives.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, for example, empowering also was an active verb. And, but they were derived from adjectives, which values are. They're descriptions of people that you envisage when you think of dissect a brand. I think the more active it is, the more easily understandable and the easily translatable it is. You're absolutely right. That is the right way to go. And therefore, it may not strictly, stirring may not be so defined as a value, but it has that aspect of taking a value to create a certain resonance and then create impact.
How would all this work in B2B versus B2C?
Equally well.
Equally well?
Equally well. Yes, absolutely. Because your definition of customers may change. Your, but everything is applied in the same manner. The brand positioning statement is as applicable to, and relevance and difference is as applicable in B2B. In fact, many of my clientele who have used this have really a combination of B2C and B2B aspects of their business. So it's worked wonderfully there.
Okay. Time for a last question here. When this exercise is done, does it necessarily mean that every other element of brand communication, be it the logo, be it whatever messaging is currently going out there, even something as basic as fonts and colors that the brand is using, is it necessary that all of this has to be impacted, or can the two remain separate?
Again, I couldn't hear the last part of your question, but yes, they need to be congruent. They are. I have looked at the front end of the process and focused there, but definitely in the whole, as I called it, detonation of the creative master concept into its various media channels, into its various tools, etc. The more close knit they are to the brand values and the brand methodology, I think it works that much better. Would you like to just tell me whether I got this?
Yes, yes, you did. Last part of
the question, right?
Yes, you answered the question there. So that's about all we have time for today, Indranil. Thank you again very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate how you're simplifying a lot of marketing for emerging brands and for brands that are trying to relook at their own philosophies, and it's been a great discussion. I thank again all the participants who joined us today. We'll be back next Friday, and we look forward to having you with us then. Indranil, thanks again.
Thank you so much.